Let's talk about muscle growth. Not the bro science way, but the real science-based way. Everyone wants bigger muscles. But most people don't actually train in a way that gets them there efficiently. They train hard, but not smart. And when it comes to building muscle, smart always beats random. So here's the truth. Muscle growth is driven by three key mechanisms: mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. You don't need to chase all of them every session, but your training should systematically expose your muscles to these forces over time. If you're lifting weights, your goal isn't to just move them from point A to point B. Your goal is to make your muscles work harder each week. That's called progressive overload. More weight, more reps, more total volume. That's how you force adaptation. But, and this is crucial, more isn't always better. You can't just keep adding weight forever. Muscles grow when training is challenging enough to stimulate them, but not so much that you can't recover. Think of it this way. Training provides the signal, recovery provides the result. If you're always sore, always exhausted, and never improving, that's not hardcore. That's just poor programming. A good science-based program focuses on volume landmarks, finding the right balance between too little and too much training. For most people, that means hitting each muscle 2-3 times a week, with enough sets to challenge growth, and deloading when fatigue builds up. And let's be clear, there are no shortcuts. Supplements, hacks, or fancy exercises don't replace consistent, evidence-based training. If you apply progressive overload, manage recovery, and eat enough protein, you will grow. It's not magic. It's biology. So next time you step in the gym, don't just train harder, train smarter. Because science doesn't guess, it measures, tests, and proves. And that's how you maximize your muscle size, through precision, patience, and persistence. Let's talk about one of the most important, yet most misunderstood concepts in all of muscle growth: progressive overload. Now, when people hear that term, they think it just means lift heavier weights. And sure, that's part of it, but it's not the whole story. Progressive overload is not about ego lifting or breaking your back to add 5 pounds every week. It's about methodically increasing the stimulus your muscles experience over time, and doing it in a way that your body can handle, recover from, and adapt to. See, your muscles are incredibly smart. They're biological tissues that respond to stress. When you challenge them with tension, by lifting weights that push them close to their limits, they adapt by getting bigger and stronger, but that only happens if the challenge gradually increases. If you keep doing the same thing, your body says, "We've already handled this," and growth stops. That's why progressive overload is the heartbeat of hypertrophy. It tells your body, hey, this stress is new, we need to grow to handle it next time. Now, the key word here is progressive. It doesn't mean reckless jumps. It means gradual, consistent increases. Sometimes week to week, sometimes even month to month. Think of it as a steady climb, not a sprint up a mountain. Let's say you bench press 100 kilos for 8 reps this week. Next week, maybe you get 9 reps, or maybe you keep 8 reps, but add a small plate. That's progression. You don't need to double your weights or chase a PR every session. You just need to nudge the stimulus forward, little by little, because over time, those small increases compound into massive gains. But here's where a lot of people mess this up. They equate progress only with load. They think if they're not adding more plates, they're not progressing. That's wrong. You can overload by increasing reps, sets, training volume, or even by improving your form and range of motion. If you're controlling the weight better, hitting deeper reps, and maintaining more tension, you're making your muscles work harder. That's overload too. It's not just about how much you lift. It's about how effectively you challenge the muscle. Another critical part is tracking your progress. You can't overload what you don't measure. If you walk into the gym every week, just winging it, you'll stay the same. Keep a logbook, note your weights, reps, and how each set felt. That's data over time. It shows you whether you're actually progressing or just spinning your wheels. Muscle growth isn't magic, it's measurable biology. And when you treat it that way, you win. Now let's address something people love to ignore. You can't progress forever. At some point, weights get heavy, fatigue builds up, and your body starts to fight back. That's when smart lifters deload. They temporarily reduce volume or intensity to recover, then come back stronger. That's still part of progressive overload because True progression includes knowing when to push and when to pull back. If you train so hard that you can't recover, you're not overloading anymore, you're just burning out. There's also a sweet spot between doing too little and doing too much. If your training is too easy, the muscles don't get the message. If it's too hard, you can't recover or maintain consistency. Progressive overload lives in that middle zone, challenging enough to force adaptation, but manageable enough that you can sustain it for months and years. That's why the best results always come to the people who think long-term. They're not chasing pump sessions or social media clips. They're building tissue week by week with precision. And let's not forget technique. You can't overload what you're not training correctly. If your form breaks down, the wrong muscles take over, and your target muscles get less stimulus. So before you think about adding weight, make sure you're actually loading the muscles you want to grow. Control the eccentric, feel the tension, and keep the reps clean. When your technique is tight, even small increases feel huge, because now every bit of that stress is going straight into the muscle fibers that need it. Another key insight, progression doesn't have to be linear. Some weeks you'll crush your lifts. Other weeks you might stay the same or even drop slightly. That's fine. Progress is like the stock market, up and down in the short term, but trending upward in the long run. As long as your training volume, intensity, and performance are generally improving over months, you're winning. Patience is part of the process. And let's be real, progressive overload is not sexy. It's not a flashy hack. It's just showing up, tracking your lifts, pushing a little harder, recovering, and doing it all again. But it's also the most reliable way to grow. Every big, strong person in the gym, the ones who look like they've been sculpted over years, they all did one thing. They progressively overloaded their training with discipline and structure. So, if you want to maximize muscle growth, forget about chasing novelty. Don't change your program every few weeks just because you're bored. Instead, master the basics, stick with them, and let progression do the work. Add weight slowly, push for extra reps, and track your performance with intent. Over time, that's what transforms your physique. Remember, your body adapts to stress. If you stop giving it new challenges, it stops adapting. So, the next time you walk into the gym, ask yourself, how am I going to do just a little better than last time? It could be one more rep, a slightly cleaner set, or a few extra kilos. That's the essence of progressive overload. And it's the foundation of every physique that's ever been built through science, discipline, and smart training. Because in the end, it's simple. If you're not progressing, you're maintaining, and maintaining doesn't grow muscle. So train with purpose, track your progress, and overload intelligently. That's how you maximize muscle growth. Not by guessing, not by luck, but by understanding the science and applying it with precision every single time you lift. Let's be honest, most people in the gym think that more training automatically means more muscle. They believe that if 4 workouts a week are good, then 6 must be better, and 10 must be legendary. But that's not how your body works. Muscles don't grow during training. They grow during recovery. Training is just the spark that lights the fire. Recovery is the oxygen that keeps it burning. Without recovery, all that effort you put into the gym becomes noise, stress your body can't adapt to. See, when you train hard, you're not building muscle in that moment. You're actually breaking it down. Lifting weights causes micro tears in your muscle fibers. Your body then goes, all right, this stress is damaging us. Let's rebuild stronger so it doesn't happen again. That rebuilding happens after you leave the gym, not during your sets. So if you keep hammering your body without giving it time to adapt, you're not stimulating growth. You're just accumulating fatigue. And fatigue is the silent killer of progress. There's a reason science calls recovery the limiting factor of muscle growth. You can only grow as fast as your body can recover from the stress you place on it. That means if your training volume, intensity, or frequency exceeds what your recovery can handle, you're no longer progressing, you're just surviving. And the body doesn't grow when it's in survival mode. Now, recovery isn't just about sitting on the couch, it's an active process. Nutrition, sleep, rest days, and proper fatigue management. Let's start with the basics. Sleep. If you're not sleeping enough, you're basically robbing your body of the #1 growth enhancer it has. Muscle protein synthesis, hormone balance, tissue repair, all of that happens when you sleep. You can't out-train 5 hours of poor sleep. You can't Grind harder to make up for bad recovery habits. Every time you skip quality rest, you're literally slowing your gains. Then there's nutrition, another massive piece of the recovery puzzle. Training hard burns energy and damages muscle tissue. Recovery requires energy and nutrients to rebuild that tissue stronger. That means getting enough protein, carbs, and total calories. Protein provides the building blocks. Carbs replenish glycogen and reduce muscle breakdown. And total calories make sure your body has the fuel to actually perform repair work. If you're under-eating while trying to grow, you're sending mixed signals to your body. You're basically saying, hey, grow, but also, sorry, there's no fuel to do it. That doesn't work. And let's talk about fatigue. Fatigue isn't just being tired. It's the accumulation of stress, mechanical, neural, hormonal, psychological, that your body experiences over time. You can't see it, but you can feel it. Maybe your strength stops going up, maybe your motivation drops, maybe your pumps feel flat, or your joints start to ache. Those are all signs that recovery isn't keeping up with training. When that happens, the solution isn't push harder. It's pull back, recover, and come back stronger. That's what smart lifters do. This is why day loads exist. Every few weeks, reducing your training volume or intensity lets your body catch up. It clears fatigue and sets the stage for more growth later. Think of it like taking a pit stop in a race. You're not slowing down, you're refueling so you can finish stronger. Too many lifters see deloads as wasted time, but in reality, they're one of the best growth tools you have. Now, here's where the science gets interesting. Studies show that the relationship between training and recovery follows an inverted U-shape. Do too little, and you won't grow. Do too much, and you also won't grow. The sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, where training is hard enough to stimulate adaptation, but not so hard that recovery can't keep up. That's why you need to listen to your body, but not in a lazy way. Don't use listening to my body as an excuse to skip hard work. Use it as a guide to balance effort and rest. You can even think of recovery as training for your nervous system. Every hard session taxes not just your muscles, but your brain, your hormones, your entire physiology. Recovery is where everything resets. That's why things like stress management, hydration, and even mental relaxation matter. If you're stressed out, sleeping poorly, and eating junk, your recovery suffers, and your gains suffer with it. Here's the reality. Muscle growth is slow. It's the result of consistent training over months and years, not days. If you burn yourself out in the first 6 weeks, you'll never see what your body could have achieved. Recovery allows you to stay in the game long enough to actually grow. That's why the most advanced athletes often train less frequently than beginners. They've learned that the key isn't maximum effort every day, it's sustainable effort over time. And let's clear up one more myth. Soreness does not equal growth. Soreness just means you cause muscle damage, but that damage might not even be productive. You don't need to crawl out of the gym to build muscle. You need to train hard enough to stimulate adaptation, then recover fully so you can come back and do it again slightly better. That's the cycle. Train, recover, adapt, repeat. Miss any one of those steps and the whole system falls apart. So when you plan your training, think of recovery as part of your program, not an afterthought. Schedule your rest days, eat enough, sleep enough, manage your stress, because the truth is, the stronger your recovery, the more training you can actually handle, and that's what drives long-term muscle growth. The people who make the best progress aren't the ones who crush every workout. They're the ones who know when to pull back, rest, and let their bodies grow. They respect the process. They understand that recovery isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's what allows your muscles to respond to all the hard work you put in. So if you really want to maximize muscle size, stop glorifying exhaustion. Being destroyed after every workout isn't a badge of honor. It's a sign that your recovery plan sucks. Train hard, yes, but recover harder, because that's where the magic happens. Growth isn't built in the gym. It's built between sessions. And the sooner you treat recovery with the same respect you give training, the faster and stronger you'll grow. Not just for a few months, but for a lifetime. Let's get real for a second. The gym is full of people training on guesswork. They jump from one workout to another, copying influencers, chasing pumps, or trying the latest secret exercise they saw on TikTok. And then they wonder why their results don't change. The truth is, muscle growth doesn't happen because you feel like you trained hard. It happens because you apply consistent, measurable, and evidence-based principles that your body actually responds to. Science isn't a buzzword. It's the foundation of results. Training with science means understanding how the body works and using that knowledge to make your training efficient and predictable. You're not just moving weights around. You're applying mechanical tension, managing fatigue, and manipulating variables that have been tested and proven to cause hypertrophy. It's the difference between guessing and knowing. Guessing is emotional. Science is structure. Let's start with something simple: effective volume. Every muscle group needs a certain amount of quality work to grow. Not random sets, not junk volume, quality work. Science calls this your minimum effective volume. It's the least amount of training that still produces results. On the other end, you have your maximum recoverable volume, the most you can do before recovery breaks down. Your goal is to live between those two landmarks. Do too little and you won't grow. Do too much and you'll dig a fatigue hole you can't climb out of. The sweet spot is where training is challenging but recoverable, where progress feels earned, not punished. And you can't find that sweet spot by guessing. You have to measure your performance. Are your lifts improving week to week? Are you adding reps, weight, or sets while still feeling strong? That's how you know you're within your optimal zone. If your performance is tanking or you're constantly exhausted, the science is clear: you're overreaching. Science-based training isn't just about doing more. It's about doing the right amount, consistently. Now, let's talk about exercise selection. Every muscle has different functions, and not every exercise hits it the same way. That's where anatomy and biomechanics come in. Science tells us which movements create the most effective tension through a muscle's range of motion. For example, deep squats target the quads differently than partial squats. Incline presses hit the upper chest more effectively than flat ones. You don't have to guess what works. We already know, because it's been measured through muscle activation studies, EMG data, and hypertrophy outcomes. Using that information doesn't make you a nerd. It makes you efficient. And speaking of efficiency, science also teaches us the importance of progressive overload with proper technique. It's not enough to lift heavier if your form breaks down. You can't grow what you're not actually training. If you start using momentum, shortening your range, or shifting the load away from the target muscle, you're no longer applying productive tension. You're just moving the bar. The science-based approach is simple: control the weight, feel the muscle, and progress over time. That's how you ensure every rep counts. Another major part of science-based training is fatigue management. The body has limits. Every hard set adds stress, and too much stress without proper recovery halts progress. This is where periodization comes in, a structured way to balance training intensity and recovery over time. Instead of going all out every session, you cycle through phases, increasing volume, pushing intensity, then pulling back for recovery. It's not guesswork, it's biology. Every top-level athlete, from bodybuilders to Olympic lifters, uses some form of periodization because it works. Then we have nutrition and recovery, which are part of the same scientific framework. You can't separate them from training. Muscle growth depends on protein synthesis, which depends on having enough amino acids, energy, and rest. Science has already shown the optimal protein intake, carb timing, and calorie ranges for growth. Ignoring that because you feel like eating clean or don't count macros is like trying to fly a plane without checking the instruments. Sure, you might stay in the air for a while, but eventually you crash. Now, here's something people rarely talk about: adaptation curves. Your body adapts to the same stimulus over time. That means if you do the same workout, the same weight, the same reps, your muscles eventually stop growing. Science-based training acknowledges that and uses planned variation to keep progress moving. That's why you might change rep ranges, swap exercises, or adjust training blocks. Not for fun, but because your body needs new stimuli to keep adapting. It's progression with purpose, not randomness disguised as variety. Let's address the mindset part too. Training with science doesn't mean you lose passion or intensity. It just means your intensity is directed. You still train hard, you still push limits, but you do it intelligently. Every set has intent. Every rep has purpose. There's no wasted motion, no blind effort. You're not just surviving your workouts, you're executing them. And that's exactly what separates long-term success from short-term hype. The people who build serious muscle over time aren't guessing what to do next. They're following principles that work for everyone because they're grounded in human physiology. Overload, volume, recovery, nutrition. These aren't opinions, they're laws of biology. You can't cheat them, but you can use them. The funny thing is, once you start training scientifically, it actually becomes more rewarding. You start seeing predictable progress. You understand why things work. You can troubleshoot when something stalls. You stop being frustrated by lack of results because you're not operating in the dark anymore. You're training with clarity and control, and that confidence, that sense of direction, it's addictive. So, if you've been training on instinct, just doing whatever feels right, it's time to evolve. The science of muscle growth is not complicated, it's just consistent application of what works. Train with enough volume to stimulate growth, overload gradually, recover properly, eat to support adaptation, and measure your progress. That's it. Everything else is noise. In the end, training without science is like driving with your eyes closed. Maybe you'll get somewhere, but probably not where you want to go. Training with science, though, that's driving with GPS. You still have to do the work, but now you know exactly where you're headed. And when you follow that map long enough, you don't just build muscle, you master the process. Because the truth is simple. Guessing builds frustration, but science builds muscle.